The arrogance of this woman was not real. Veronica Hayes, HOA president, who governed our complex like a tyrant, wearing a designer blazer, walked onto my front porch and ordered me to evict my own family from my home. She referenced fictional rules, handcuffed me with a $500 penalty, and smiled like she'd already won. My parents and sister were simply visiting, yet she treated them like invaders. What she didn't realize was that she just violated family, and my dad wasn't a man to underestimate. Her haughty smile dissolved when her little perfect empire started to fall apart, and the expression on her face when it all came crashing down, pure poetry. This isn't more than a tale of a power-hungry HOA despot. It's one of rebellion, strategy, and justice that'll make your blood boil and your heart sing. I'm Daniel Foster, a 29-year-old computer programmer who'd cobbled together for years in order to purchase my first home in Willow Creek Estates, a pretty Georgia neighborhood with immaculate lawns and community pool that sold me on the location 6 months in. I was thrilled to finally welcome my family after 3 years. Apart from the pandemic, my parents, Thomas and Elizabeth Foster, and my sister Emily, a law student, visited on a sunny Friday. The hugs were endless, and witnessing my mom's smile while viewing my home made me proud. We were catching up over coffee when a sudden knock broke the moment. There stood Veronica, her face scrunched up with disapproval, holding a clipboard like a weapon. "Mr. Foster," she snapped, cutting any pretense of courtesy. "Per Regulation 17.3b, overnight guests can't remain longer than 48 hours without board registration, and 22.5 restricts unregistered guests to 2. You've got 3 additional cars in your driveway, defying street appearance regulations." I was amazed as she spewed rules like a prosecutor. I told her my family was visiting temporarily, but she was fixed. Rules are rules, they leave, or you pay a $150 fee and wait 14 days for approval. Her smile was venomous, more grimace than grin. My face burned as my family overheard this absurdity. My father Thomas watched silently, his green eyes narrowing, a telltale sign. His sharp mind was already at work. I gripped the doorframe, swallowing my anger. Veronica looked into my house, seeing my new curtains. Those weren't approved, violation of 8.2a. The nerve of requiring permission to have curtains in my own house was infuriating. Not wishing to spoil our reunion, I acquiesced to paying the fee and completing her 5-page form. As she strutted away, my father appeared at the door. "This isn't about rules, Daniel," he said softly. Emily whispered, "Dad, don't make a scene." He raised a hand, smiling slightly. "Just curious about this HO." That night, despite my mom's attempts to keep things light, the mood was heavy. My father, a judge with 30 years on the bench, was already flipping through my HOA covenant, his legal pad filling with notes. "Just light reading," he said with a wink. I knew then Veronica had no idea who she was up against. The next morning I chatted with my neighbor Mark Thompson, a civil engineer, and one of the few friendly faces in Willow Creek. "You got Veronica's greeting," he said, shaking his head. "She selectively enforces rules her friends pass. Everyone else is fined." He told us about how she'd catch him $850 for bushes 3 inches too tall, while her ally Karen had an unauthorized gazebo forgotten. My dad, having coffee, caught up with us. When Mark discovered he was a judge, his eyes grew bright. "That's trouble for Veronica," he whispered, lowering his tone. "Last year, the Clarks attempted to fight her over holidays lights. Fines compelled them to sell. Back home, my father cut up the HOA bylaws, citing ambiguous clauses and contradictions that most probably broke Georgia law. He dug up public records, discovering that Veronica had served as president for 8 years with no leadership turnover. I filled out the guest form and fee, knowing that approval would be forthcoming after my family's visit concluded. That afternoon, Ronald Pierce, Veronica's loyal vice president and a retired accountant appeared snapping my parents' car on the street. Guest cars can't park on the street more than 4 hours, Rule 15.7D, he said smugly. My dad went outside. I didn't notice that rule this morning, isn't it? Unpublished, Ronald stuttered, saying it was new. Georgia law mandates 30-day notice of new penalties, my dad retorted. Ronald handed me a $200 ticket and ran. My mom shook her head. Our previous HOA was never this bad. Next door, Lisa Bennett, a young homeowner who'd originally supported Veronica, told us they refused my solar panels, explaining they're disruptive, but Veronica's friend possesses them. He donates to her charity. That night, we went to an HO meeting at the community center. Veronica barred our entrance, saying it was homeowners only. My father introduced himself, Judge Thomas Foster, Fulton County Court, here to observe. Her face paled, but she opened the door for us. The room hummed as residents whispered about his title. An older man delivered discreet thumbs up. The session was like a tribunal with Veronica and her board, Ronald and treasurer Susan Clark. Warning over a muted crowd, Veronica enumerated infractions, glaring at me when referring to my unregistered visitors. My father inquired about a $45,000 legal consultation fee in the budget. Veronica snapped, no questions from non-homeowners. I repeated the question, but she waved it aside. Susan confessed she did not know the details, and Ronald hurried to steer the conversation elsewhere. A subtle shift rippled through the room. Residents exchanged glances, feeling vulnerable. Lisa courageously questioned a landscaping contract given to Ronald's cousin, labeling it a conflict of interest. Others, encouraged, asked about shady finances. As the meeting concluded, my father asked for financial records invoking Georgia law. Veronica refused, sneering, "Control your guests, Mr. Foster." Outside neighbors approached us. "Thank you for speaking up," one whispered. An elderly black resident, George Ellis, warned, "Veronica forced out 3 families last year." Her sister-in-law buries complaints at the county. He told tales of a family fined for their autistic child's noise and a nurse harassed for late-night arrivals. "Why no reports?" Emily asked George. "Side legal battles are too expensive." A new violation notice was waiting for us. $750 for disrupting the meeting. My father's eyes flashed with anger. So rare. "All right, Veronica, let's play." He laid out a plan. Unite residents, traced the money, and used the law against her. He called his colleague Laura Mitchell, an HOA attorney, who verified the fines were unenforceable and broke state law. Emily dug through online records where she located 7 retracted complaints against the HOA. My father checked public records, revealing that Veronica and Ronald channeled money to their business, Horizon Consulting, accounting for the $45,000 charge. We met Olivia Carter, a former resident, at a coffee shop. She shared the way questioning Veronica caused incessant fines until she sold her home for less than market value to Ronald's cousin. They targeted families who did not fit their idea. She said displaying images of others pushed out. Veronica's harassment grew more intense. Each day, notices for small things such as grass height or a non-existent oil stain. Ronald parked in front of my home taking pictures. I spoke with him, and Emily videotaped it, threatening harassment charges. He drove away, shaken. The ridiculousness reached a peak with a fine for excessive watering in a rainstorm and another 4 unauthorized parties when we had breakfast outside. Veronica even cornered my mom by the mailboxes. "Sniping at community values," my mother answered calmly. "My husband's maintained those for 30 years. Veronica then teased perilously. She levied a city court complaint against my father, charging judicial misconduct and saying he threatened the HOA. The summons, served by Officer Brian Walsh, charged him with abusing his power. Outright lies. Emily learned Veronica's ex-husband was connected to a housing discrimination case. My father decided in Baker County, this is retaliation. My father knew the complaint had been made to city court skirting his county court. He laughed, my turf. He reached out to his friend court clerk Sarah Evans and recused himself to prevent bias. We planned like a war room. Laura filed a countersuit for abuse of power and embezzlement. We asked for 5 years of HOA records, citing transparency laws. Emily's resident forum erupted with tales of harassment, exposing patterns of targeting families with children and minorities. Mark introduced us to 20 residents who signed affidavit. Lisa gave meeting minutes demonstrating Veronica's rules were never voted on. Veronica attempted to backtrack, showing up at my door to settle things. A misunderstanding, she said. But my father cut her down. It's time for accountability. We know about Horizon Consulting. Her face fell and she hissed, "You'll regret crossing me." Emily caught Ronald arguing with a man outside Veronica's house, a lawyer, Edward Pierce, his brother with city court ties. A new summons accused my father of misconduct on the basis of a video in which he threatened HOA. My father encountered Judge Margaret Lee, a colleague who was angry with Edward's undisclosed dispute and the doctored video. She dropped the summons and initiated an inquiry. Residents mobilized at Mark's residence, where Susan disclosed checks to Horizon Consulting, admitting Veronica coerced her into falsifying reports. The scheme was huge. Veronica and Ronald swindled $200,000 and manipulated home sales for gain, targeting enterers and house flipping through shell companies. Veronica summoned an emergency HOA meeting, calling for a 30% increase in legal fees. I protested, and Mark stood accusing her of manufacturing the crisis. Lisa waived her minutes, establishing the rules were phony. Residents broke out, relating tales of harassment. Ellen Carter, an older woman, called out a $1,000 penalty for her roses. Professor Henry Walsh revealed $200,000 in unexplained consulting fees. Susan defected to join residents with proof of fraud. Veronica's grip slipped. Ronald's frantic calls did not stem her removal. Emily documented Veronica alone, whispering, "They all Levy family, now this neighborhood." Her empire was breaking down as Veronica threatened suits. A sheriff's car drove up. My father released after Emily established the video. As a hoax emerged with Sheriff Diane Carter, Veronica Hayes, "I've pursued records of fraud, theft, and perjury." He disclosed the sheriff issued warrants to search property. Ronald came only to be served himself. His stare at Veronica, deadly news cameras invited in by Veronica to cover her press conference, witnessed her demise. Neighbors applauded when she was treated to her smugness, overridden with panic. "You can't make me leave," she screamed. My father returned with, "The court can if you're convicted." Susan was named interim HOA president, vowing to reform. The investigation had Veronica and Ronald's scam spreading throughout multiple communities, featuring recordings of the two setting out to catch residents. They both took plea bargains, returning funds and undergoing probation. Previous inhabitants testified and the DA pressed the charges, firmly citing cooked-up evidence. 1 month later, we held a rule-bashing barbecue with a sign taunting old rules. Neighbors laughed, children played, and Olivia and others came back. Welcomed with open arms, my father toasted to an HOA that works for people. He later confessed he bluffed on banning Veronica countywide, capitalizing on her faith in his authority. Willow Creek became a real community. New rules were equitable meetings, cooperative, and restored funds, repaired infrastructure. My father advised other HOAs. Emily's study inspired state changes, and I discovered belonging in a neighborhood. Once terrorized, justice was not merely punishment. It was making a haven where all of us could prosper. Veronica thought she could intimidate us out, but our strength and truth broke her empire.